Something about this morning, but I'm just feeling super grateful for every part that you all play in this service and for all who have gathered. I have to say that I miss hearing us sing together terribly. I really do. I love to sing with all of you on Sunday mornings. It just opens a part of me that honestly isn't touched in any other way. I miss our 9 o'clock services where a small group of us would sing a cappella, sometimes well, and other times just literally having to abandon a song that was just too ambitious without accompaniment or having choir members scattered among us. I miss the 10:30 service where more voices can carry each tune, where we learn new songs together, where we stumble through some old awkward hymns, and where we sing loudly when there is a song of joy or hope and love. And I miss those times when we hold those songs that feel like prayers or mantras with reverence. This month's theme is stillness. And as I sat to write my newsletter article this month, I heard the song that we just heard earlier, Find a Stillness. It settled into my body and spirit as I sat there. Find a stillness, hold the stillness, let the stillness carry me. Find the silence, hold the silence, let the silence carry me. Those words are of an intentional surrender and trust. The sound of that hymn always lulls me into this place of silence, which I'm so grateful for. It kind of feels a little bit weird to reflect on stillness after this huge, long period of physical distancing and working from home and staying local. So many of us are growing weary of being in the confines of our own homes or apartments. And as the weather cools, there's just less opportunities for us to gather with friends and loved ones safely outside. With so much less to do outside of where we live, many of us are longing for parts of our old lives back, live music and theater, restaurants, busy streets, and traveling to be with others and to see new places. Even with the introduction of the vaccine, we know it's going to be quite some time before our church and homes and shared places in the community are safe places to gather. But stillness, like other spiritual practices, requires a level of intention that goes beyond not moving or just sitting on our couches. The more I understand about stillness, it becomes clear that one need not be totally silent or still, as in motionless, to practice stillness. For instance, Henry Thoreau, a transcendentalist who was and still is influential in our faith, wrote a book titled Walking. There's a segment of his book where he goes into the finer details of sauntering, which is a much slower form of movement, which allowed him to take in all that was within and around him during his days at Walden Pond. He said, nothing can be more useful to a person than a determination not to be hurried. I was drawn to a book titled The Art of Stillness, Adventures of Going Nowhere by Pico Iyer, who first built a career as a successful travel writer. I heard him being on an interview with Krista Tippett on her show On Being, and then I followed up by watching his TED Talk. His little book is beautiful. It's a simple book to read and has lovely images of almost like sunsets in between each chapter. Maybe it's because we're really not allowed to go anywhere that this idea of being nowhere as actually being adventurous had a certain appeal. Listen to the last paragraph of his book. In an age of speed, I began to think nothing could be more invigorating than going slow. In an age of distraction, nothing can be more luxurious than paying attention. In an age of constant moving, nothing is more urgent than sitting still. You can go on vacation to Paris or Hawaii or New Orleans months from now, and you'll have a tremendous time, I'm sure. But if you want to come back feeling new, alive and full of fresh hope and in love with the world, I think the place to visit may be nowhere. This concept of stillness includes the practice of meditation, and it's also open to so many other varieties of stillness. Taking a 5-minute pause during the day, letting your mind wander without restriction, and working to quiet those noisy thoughts that may dominate most of your waking hours are all forms of stillness. This is good news for those of us who have struggled to make meditation a regular practice in our lives. Novelist and poet Hermann Hesse said, "Within you, there is a stillness and a sanctuary to which you can retreat at any time and be yourself." And Eckhart Tolle, spiritual teacher and author, reminds us of the exact opposite, saying, "When you lose touch with stillness, you lose touch with yourself." We in the Western world, who are bound by a work ethic that tells us if we're not doing something, we are wasting time, are the ones who struggle most with the idea of stillness. We often fill our times of rest with television, radio, podcast, news, etc. This constant filling of our lives is suffocating our core being. Iyer says, "The need for empty space, a pause, is something that we have all felt in our bones." In our bones. It's the rest in a piece of music that gives it its resonance and shape. Iyer encourages us to find a stillness as we go about our days. This gift of these precious moments not only provides a greater sense of peace, but they can also lead to a stronger sense of self and creativity and even problem solving and more compassion. Iyer finds delight and lightness in stillness. This isn't just a serious thing for him. Having recently adopted a puppy, those of you who are at the lunch bunch are fully aware of our new dog, Reggie. I've been studying this animal and just actually went out for a walk with him this morning and just watched him take in all the smells and taste literally anything he could find in his path and stop to see a squirrel or hear a sound, and a block away, I swear to God, this dog can hear everything. Pico, Iyer, loves metaphors and that often pull on these ideas of dogs. I love the one he used of letting one's mind wander off leash to where inspiration may be hiding. Iyer shares his own experiences to us as well. For instance, he's talking about learning how to be unbusy on an airplane. He used to do everything he could on an airplane, catch up on work, watch the movies, eat, do everything he could to kind of fill that time. And he had been challenged by someone to use that time as time that isn't busy, just time of stillness. And so he recognized that as he was sitting there, thoughts that came into planning or doing would pop up. So he would just make a little marking of those, and then he would let go again. And he says, the rest of the time, I just let my mind go foraging or lie down like a dog on a wide, empty beach. I love that image. It's only by taking myself away from the clutter and distraction that I can begin to hear something out of earshot, he says, and recall that listening is much more invigorating than giving voice to all my thoughts and prejudices that keep me company 24 hours a day. It's only by going nowhere, by sitting still or letting my mind relax, that I can find the thought that comes to me unbidden, those that are far fresher and more imaginative than the ones I consciously seek out. He says setting an auto response on his email or turning off the TV when he's on the treadmill, trying to find a quiet place in the midst of a crowded day or a city, all quickly open up an unsuspected space. I really do think I've held on to a very narrow concept of stillness, and perhaps you have as well. But stillness isn't just a single destination. And the narrower the concept, the less inclined I've been willing to give it a go. It helps me to recognize that, as I said earlier, that meditation is just one form of stillness. And I like the idea of stillness providing a new perspective and unexpected openings of my mind and my heart and my spirit. During this past week's group for people who live alone, I was asking if people have discovered new ways of doing things, have created new curiosities or skills, or found something to move beyond that which I kind of am just feeling is this monotony of days and weeks and months. Participants of that group gave beautiful answers that were as varied as they are individuals. And last night during our second Saturday storytelling, Lois Burnett and Ben Withart and Ali Monahan spoke of stillness in their lives. I was aware as they spoke that stillness was a source of strength, of hope, of recognition of a vital part of themselves, and a place to find that connection to the earth and to the universe. I mentioned our transcendental roots as a source that resonates with many Unitarian Universalists. Thoreau, a prolific writer and thought leader of his time, says it matters not where or how far you travel. The farther, commonly the worse. But it matters how alive you are. Stillness, when seen as a view of our interior and our exterior lives, is actually an important lifeline. It releases us of our past and our future, and it asks us to be alive in the present. Iyer reflects, I've been reminded on the mountain that talking about stillness is really a way of talking about clarity and sanity and the joys that endure. Nowhere, the place where stillness is located, is far from a lack of destination. Stillness, he says, is necessary for anyone who wishes to gather less visible resources. Going nowhere is not about austerity so much as coming close to one's senses. Mark Bellatini, a contemporary Unitarian Universalist minister, writer, and poet, describes stillness in a poem titled Slower and Slower. Here's an excerpt. Let there be stillness in my heart for a moment, the balance point between breathing in and out, like the pause of a dancer between movements in the music. Let the breathing in this room be free and flowing. Let pulses trance a slower rhythm in the wrist. Let the coming silence be like hands pulling back a curtain, revealing the table set with a feast of life, which is present here and now, and has been the whole while, present to those who give up living in either the past or the future. I love those lines. Let the coming silence be like hands pulling back a curtain, revealing the table set with the feast of life that is present here and now, and has been the whole while. Even though we're homebound, our access to information creates a freneticism that is unparalleled in history. Iyer cites Kevin Kelly, who is the founding executive director of Wired magazine, who makes his livelihood writing about emerging technology, yet he also builds in times when he turns it all off. Kelly says, I continue to keep the cornucopia of technology at arm's length so that I can more easily remember who I am. Wow. The last thing I want for myself or for you is to lose ourselves in this unprecedented moment of history. For losing ourselves doesn't simply impact each of us as individuals. Iyer says it deprives the greater world of your love and contribution to the common good. Going nowhere isn't about turning your back on the world. It's about stepping away now and then so that you can see the world more clearly and love it more deeply. We speak of our faith being fueled by love. We side with love. We practice radical love when we have the courage to do so, and we let love guide us. When fear, hate, anger, distrust, and division are what are offered to us in our daily news under the guise of information, we have to work to remember that there is equally powerful and true reality of love, acceptance, trust, intersectionality, and honoring of one another in the earth, and that there's a growing unity around values and dreams which aim to empower those who've been historically oppressed. Think of stillness as not just a way to make it through your days, weeks, or years, or not even as a source but as a source that can take us to surprising and creative places. Recognize stillness as a way to be a better citizen of the world. Iyer says the point of gathering stillness is not to enrich the sanctuary or the mountaintop, but to bring calm into motion, into the commotion of the world. Before we move into our time for reflections, I want to bring another hymn of stillness into this season, that of winter, the time when darkness descends upon us in the late afternoon. Like Find a Stillness, this hymn helps me turn my resistance to the darkness of winter into an invitation to enter into a space of love, peace, ease, and clarity. After this video, I'd like to hear from those of you who have found stillness to be a source for your spirit, your heart, or your body.
Dark of winter, soft and still, your quiet calm surrounds me. Let my thoughts go where they will, ease my mind profoundly, and then my soul will sing a song, a blessed song of love eternal. Gentle darkness, soft and still, bring your quiet to me. Darkness, soothe my weary eyes, that I may see more clearly. When my heart with sorrow cries, comfort and caress me, and then my soul may hear a voice, a still small voice of love eternal. Darkness, when my fears arise, let your peace flow through me.
So I'm wondering, when have you found stillness to be a source for your spirit, your heart, and or your body? I know some of you were reflecting on that last night and were asked by Jen, who was hosting the evening, about memories of stillness. So I'm curious if some of you would share that sense of when stillness has been a source for you. I believe Chris is the one who is searching for folks who are interested. You can raise your hand or write something in the comment box.
Lots of stillness.
It was quiet last night after the stillness stories as well. I will share a link to both of the videos when we send out the recording of this service.
I have had some experience when listening to music, and the experience is that when the music ends, and if it's particularly a very, very moving piece of music, when it ends, I feel a stillness, which it brings so much more value to that listening.
I hear you, Sam. I think that was what I was, when I was reflecting back on that time, those times in the sanctuary when we sing together or we hear special music, just how that impacts us as human beings. Pamela writes, I often seek silence. I enjoy walks in nature as stillness, as well as sitting in nature and just listening and observing and being. A sort of meditation without trying to meditate.
Norma had her hand up.
Yeah, this is Marilyn. When I garden, that really gives me stillness. And also something we won't be doing this year, traveling down to South Padre, the Gulf and the ocean, just the power just makes me quiet and still.
It's like it's time for like guided meditation for us to close our eyes and imagine those waves in the water and the smell and the breeze and all of that. Thank you for bringing that up, Marilyn. I see Ben.
Admittedly, I don't slow down as much as I probably ought to. But there's a couple places. Yoga is one of those that obviously, like during yoga, it's not slow. However, the way I used to do yoga semi-regularly involves 2 points in the practice where there's savasana, corpse pose, which is very much just being grounded to the earth and being still. And that was probably, call it a half an hour in those days where like, that's the stillest I've ever been. And like, you're forced to remove thoughts. So that's one of them. The other one was years ago when I finally got into listening to vinyl records and forced myself to listen to music deliberately, because you get 4 songs and then you stand up and then you flip the record over and you listen to 4 more. So instead of something in the background where you're doing something else, it very much was this moment of just sitting down, and the only thing I was doing in that moment was just listening to music. So 2 places, neither of which I seem to do nearly as much as I used to.
I hear you. God, I love that thought of vinyl records also, because even though the recording is the same for everyone, there's some way that that needle lands on those records where you would often hear variations each time it was played. And there is something about that acute listening when it's vinyl that does feel different. Thanks, Ben.
Katie?
So one thing that always invites stillness for me is fog. I love fog unless I'm driving. But we have a cabin in the family in Michigan, and part of our lake is bordered by rocks, big rocks, and so I would go down on the rocks to sit on a foggy morning, and so you could barely see the lake. You couldn't see across the lake. Everything enveloped in fog, and really, you know, there's a silence, a quiet in fog that is different, I think, than other times. And maybe I should remember that when I need silence.
Yeah. Thanks, Katie. Yeah, we have all these visualizations. Roger or Jamie? Roger, you're muted. You have to unmute.
And then Elizabeth.
Okay, am I unmuted?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay, I'm recalling when I was a young boy and I had a newspaper route, especially in the winter. When I deliver the paper, it would be dark. And I had this big bag slung around my shoulder with the 86 papers in it that I would trudge through the snow in the dark. And quite often, you know, when it was like sub-zero, I wouldn't see any other people. I'd see cars, but I wouldn't see people outside. So it'd be like I was all alone in the world. And I particularly remember that the largest sound was the crunch of the snow under my shoes.
So beautiful. Thank you, Roger. I can picture you there with your 85 papers over your shoulder and
86.
Oh, 86, excuse me. And that silence of the morning and the sound of winter, like winter has sounds.
Right.
Thank you. I think we have one more person, and then I think we're going to have to close up
Elizabeth had her
and
hand up.
share
Yes,
time for our small groups afterwards. Beth.
I'm aching with the thought of stillness because I really, really, really miss the stillness I had out in my woods,
Mm.
and I don't have that here. It's like the city never rests, and I really miss that.
Yeah. Thank you for that, Beth. How real that is. Yeah, and it has been interesting having people share stories of that stillness and how we might be able to get there, even if we are in the noise of the city or in the darkness of winter and long for sunshine. So thank you all for sharing.